Hello, everyone. Welcome tonight. I'm so excited you're here, and I'm excited to kick off talking about these preparedness topics for the year. We are going to get started. We're recording. We're also running live on Facebook right now. So I'm a stickler for starting on time at 7 p.m. So thank you for those of you who are here with me tonight. I'm really excited to talk about these topics. And what I've decided to do is pretty much do 2 topics every other month. So every other month, we're going to do one of these meetings where we just deep dive into the topics for those 2 chapters and really get into some specifics. I'm also anxious to hear your questions and really get some answers to you. It's been interesting as I've had comments and things from people who've been reading the book, who have been using the book as a study group book. I have a large group that's using this as a study group for the next 6 months. I have a lot of people who are using it for their church groups, and I just am thrilled with all of those things. And what I found with a lot of the questions that I've been receiving is that there's a real wide variety of people that I'm talking to, and it's great. I have people who know more than I do, who are answering questions for me and making sure that I am getting things right as I'm teaching all of you. And then there's people who are just barely starting and they don't even know where to start and they're a little overwhelmed to begin with. And that's the whole purpose of this book, is to make it so that you don't have to feel that overwhelm. So I'm excited about that, but it makes it a little challenging for the teaching because I don't want to, looks like I'm frozen here. There we go. Because I don't want to bore anyone, with things you already know, but I don't want to overwhelm anyone with things that are beyond what they want to know. So a little bit challenging, but I think that as I really, looked through the chapters and the topics, I think I have some things hopefully you'll all want to hear and will really help you in your preparedness efforts. So let's get going. I'm hoping this to be about an hour, including your questions. So I'm not going to talk for the whole hour. And if you have questions as we're going along, please write them in the chat, and I will make sure that we get to those questions. If there's so many we don't get to them live, I'll make sure that we get them emailed along with the recording of this. But I don't anticipate you're going to have that many questions. So make sure you put those in the chat, and I'll get to those at the end of what I have to talk about. All right, let's first talk about why water. It's interesting. As we've had this big winter storm, there have been some interesting posts from family members and things that I have been following. I have a cousin that lives in Texas, and they are getting snow like they've never seen before, and they have been without power for many days. And this is not something that they're used to. Not only that, but their homes really aren't used to this kind of cold. And so they don't have the same insulation that I do here in Utah, where I'm used to this kind of stuff. And so they've been bundling up in sweaters and blankets and sleeping bags and really having to do things that they're not accustomed to. And I saw that one person was really struggling because they didn't have water. Their water was out, which I thought was interesting from this storm. And not only that, but they were having frozen pipes and broken pipes because their pipes aren't insulated also. Again, they're not used to this kind of weather. So they were having a lot of water issues. And I thought, okay, so they're really quickly identifying that having stored water in your home is a really important thing to have, because we don't last very long with water. I love this survival rule of threes because it's an easy one to remember. You can survive for 3 minutes without air, 3 hours without shelter. And that's true in some of these situations. I was talking with a woman yesterday. She lives in Montana, and she said that they have been negative 30 degrees, but negative 50 degrees with wind chill for weeks on end. And she said the problem with that is that some homes that have automatic locks on them, that aren't just turn a key in the lock, that have automatic locks, they stop functioning in the cold. And she said some people have had problems where they've gone outside to start a car, let's say, and the car, the door closes behind them and locks, and they actually can't open up again. You don't take your phone with you oftentimes just to start your car, and they found people that have died from exposure out, by their car, not able to get back into their home again. And it's a big deal for shelter. So shelter 3 hours, 3 days without water, and 3 weeks without food. So, like I've said a lot, that's why water comes first in my mind, because we can survive a lot less time without water than we can with food. If an emergency were to happen today, if we were to get in a massive snowstorm wherever you live, if you were to get a massive snowstorm and things were to completely shut down, what would the first things that you should do? What were the first things that you should do? So the first thing you should do is, you don't want, if it's a winter storm like we're experiencing right now, you don't want those pipes to freeze. So one trick for making sure your pipes don't freeze is to leave the water running, the cold water running, not so that you don't run your hot water, the cold water running just as a trickle. What that's doing is, it's the same idea why a moving stream doesn't freeze, but yet a stationary lake does, because the moving water won't freeze the same way that water that's just still in your pipes will. So you want to leave a trickle going with your water on if it's very cold. You also want to make sure to keep a steady temperature in your home. We often will think, well, we're going to just turn the heat down at night because we're going to bundle up, we're going to be in our beds, and we can be okay with a lot lower temperature at nighttime. Well, you need to remember that you have those pipes that are also relying on that temperature to stay not frozen. So don't drop those temperatures too much during nighttime, otherwise you might have frozen pipes. Once an emergency does hit, you need to fill your bathtubs, fill everything that you have with water. Now, my bathtubs aren't entirely watertight, meaning, if I were to fill my tub and come back in a couple of days, I'm not going to have the same amount of water in those that I did originally. So you want to cover the drain in the tub with something that's going to seal. So a bowl, something of that sort that will seal that better than your drain does, and that way it'll keep the water inside of that tub. So you're going to want to fill your tubs. You're going to want to fill your sinks, the ones that you're not using. Anything that can be left, you're going to want to fill. And that's what one of these friends was talking about, that the friend that they knew that was having water problems had come from the Midwest. And so he was used to some of these winter storms and he knew what to do. And his girlfriend was really happy about that because she didn't know what to do. She was from warmer climates and she didn't know. And he had already filled all their tubs. He had already done a lot of these things. So make sure you're just doing that, just thinking ahead. Okay, how can we save as much water as we can? Now, you should have information in the book about how to drain your pipes. You don't have to do that if the water pipes aren't damaged. However, in severe cold, there's a good likelihood that the water pipes may be damaged. So it's not a bad idea to drain the water from those pipes. And also turn the water off to the street, to the main water supply. Again, if the pipes aren't damaged, don't do that. If there's an earthquake, something like that, where the pipes are severely damaged, you're going to want to turn the water off to your home. The reason is you don't want contaminated water coming in and contaminating the rest of the water in your home, because that your home contains a lot of water inside the pipes, inside the water heater. You want to be able to preserve that as long as possible. So you turn the water off to your home. That way, every bit of water that's in your home is still being able to be saved. Now, you don't have to drain those pipes immediately. That's only if you have very cold weather and you're worried about the pipes inside of your home also breaking. Then you do want to drain those pipes. What you do is, if you have a multi-layered home, you're going to open up a faucet at the top and a faucet at the bottom, and make sure you have something to catch the water at the bottom. So a big 5-gallon drum, something like that. What it's going to do is gravity is going to feed the water from the top to the bottom, and it's going to empty it. There'll be some that comes out of that pipe at the top, but very little. Most of it's going to come out at the bottom, and you're going to want to save as much as you can in whatever you have. So, the big water coolers, whatever you have, use those to use that water. Or save it in the home. Obviously, if it's a water heater, that's going to stay quite a while before you're ever worrying about having that freeze. So that's a nice water storage you have right there. And then, like I said, drain the water. So that's what to do in relation to water as soon as an emergency happens. You just need to think water, real quick, water. Okay, do I need to turn the water to the city off, or the water to my, that's coming into my home? No, the pipes are fine. Okay, great. I'm just going to leave them trickling so they don't freeze. I'm still going to fill my bathtub just in case. So just think, okay, how am I going to make sure that I have water here during this emergency? Then, of course, in preparation for emergency, we just want to store a lot of water. So how do we do that? One of my big rallying cries is always these commercial water bottles. Those are the bottles that you're going to get at any store. You're just going to get a whole case or multiple cases of water bottles. Now, why? I've had people say, this isn't a good recommendation. That plastic leaches into the water. I know those things are true. However, I'm going to take that water over no water any day of the week. And they're really easy to store. My favorite place to store them is underneath a bed, because oftentimes there's nothing underneath those beds, especially children's beds, those kinds of things. Shove a case of water under the bed and it's going to get them for it's going to take care of that person that's sleeping in that bed about 3 days worth of water. That's a great bit of storage. It's not everything you need, but that's a place to start. And oftentimes as I talk to people, it's funny because I've talked to so many people about this and they say, I went to Costco, I got a whole bunch of cases of water. I just feel better now. And oftentimes you just need to take that first step. You need to feel better. And then you go, man, I can do the next step now. This is great. So the next step is some larger water containers. You may have seen those big blue barrels, 50-gallon barrels that sit inside your garage. Those are things you definitely want to have. Now, it's nice to have a 50-gallon, or it's nice to have even larger if you have room for it. You may not have room for it, but if you do, that's a fabulous way to store water because it's a lot and it's going to be able to store for quite a long time. There's also smaller containers. There's 5-gallon containers that are more moldable and portable, because there's no way on earth you're going to be able to move a 50-gallon container of water, but you can move a 5-gallon container of water. So have a few of those stored as well. I have some 2-gallon water bottles that I just got from the grocery store. Just whatever you have room for, I encourage you to store. Now, if you have a big blue one or that sort of big tank, you have to make sure that wherever you're storing it is fairly waterproof in case you have some spilling or something happen with that. So just make sure it's on a basement floor, or you have a basin around it or something like that so that you don't ruin carpet wherever you might be putting it. There's even larger storage things. There's storage totes, IBC totes that'll, I can't even remember how much is in those, 250 gallons, I think, something of that sort, a lot. And those are great totes to have as well. Where we're at, right where I live in Utah, I have to be careful because I can't put those outside in the wintertime. They're going to freeze inside of those totes or inside of the barrel. So it does have to be someplace insulated that won't freeze, at least if I'm going to store it outside. Otherwise, I just have a whole bunch of them stacked outside. But it freezes where I live. So I have to make sure that they're insulated in some way. And then the last one to think about is rainwater storage. There are some restrictions on this based on where you live in your municipality. They have rules sometimes on how much rainwater you're able to store. Supposedly the rainwater belongs to the city it comes down in, which I think is kind of an interesting concept. But so we're limited on the amount that we can store. So make sure you just check with your local regulations on how much you can store on your property. However, I store all the way up to the max because I feel like this is something that's really important to do. So rainwater storage, or at least be able to harvest the rainwater every single time. Until I got my rainwater storage system built, every time it rained, my husband just dreaded it. Every time it rained, I'd say, boy, I wish we sure had our rainwater storage system built. And he'd roll his eyes and walk outside and look at the rain. And so now I have it built, and I'm really happy that I have it built because every single time it rains, I'm going to be adding to that storage. It could be something as simple as just a barrel that you put at the bottom of your downspouts. I'm now building a few greenhouses in my backyard. And so I'm putting rainwater collection, just gutters, and they're just inexpensive things. I'm using some old HVAC tubing that we flatten out and make a little V out of, just some recycled salvage stuff, so that we can collect rainwater off of every structure in our yard as well. Just be thinking, how could I harvest water from whatever I have in my yard right now? And then the next place is what we call found water. Actually, found water. So what is found water? That's water that you don't already have in your yard, or that you don't already have stored in your home, and that doesn't come off of your roof. So that may be a ditch, something near you. It may also be well water. Again, there are some restrictions about wells, but most places you can dig a certain size of well. Sometimes you need to get a permit, so find out about that from your city, but that's something that I'm prepared to do. And where I live, actually, right above me, right north of me, everything had been fields for many, many years. There's homes there now. That's the way everything seems to go. But it had been big farm fields, and the previous owner of our home told us that they had to use a sump pump at the bottom of, we have a walkout basement. And they said they had to use a sump pump at the bottom of that walkout basement for years until those homes went in, when it was just farmland. And so we perked up when we heard that, because we knew that there was water not far away from that walkout basement. And that's where we actually dug our root cellar, was into a wall in that area. And we found water about a foot down. So we paid a lot of attention to that. And if we need water, we know that it's about a foot down from that walkout basement area. So we've prepared for that. We have a pump already. We have some piping. We have some things that we could use. So just think about it. Where could I find water? In fact, I just got an email today from a woman who said, I just got your book. I'm, reading about water. And you said, talked about found water. And she said, I freaked out a little bit because I have never thought about water before, other than the water that comes to my house and the nice people that help me get it here. But now I'm starting to think, where could I find water? So I want you to think about that too. Just start thinking, where could you find water? Sorry, we're going to mute somebody here. Once you found that water, there's two really important things that you need to do to the water. And that may be even the water that you have in your home, whatever it might be. You need to filter it and purify it. And I'm going to talk about the differences between the two, because there are differences and there are reasons for both. So a filter is, if you think about it, we use filters on a lot of things. A filter is going to strain out bigger things. Now, this is some interesting information. Bacteria are about 0.2 microns, or 2 microns. And most filters, if they'll filter out at a 2 micron level, will filter out bacteria, because that's the smallest bacteria. They get bigger from there. So a lot of filters will actually take care of the bacteria in the water that you're drinking. It will also filter out parasites, things like Giardia, because those parasites, those protozoa, have a hard coating on the outside, and they actually aren't killed by chemical means. So they have to be filtered out. So you need to get a filter that will take care of parasites and bacteria. It needs to be fine enough that as things pass through it, those things are going to be caught and trapped. So that's filtering. Then there is chemically killing, which is purifying. Viruses are so small, they're not going to be trapped in any kind of filter material. So you need to purify as well to be able to take care of viruses. There's also other chemical contaminants and things in the water that purifying will take care of as well through the chemical actions. So what are ways to do these two things? Filtering, this is, again, you can think about it. This is the stuff we're running through a filter. We know what a filter means. So a coffee filter is something that you can use. And is it going to be a fine filter? No, you're going to want to purify it after it for sure. But you're going to filter it. You can run it through layers of cotton sheeting. If you have nothing else, you have sheets on your bed, or you have sheets sitting in your closet that could be put on a bed, right? So there are sheets that you can use if you run it through layers of t-shirt material, that sort of thing. That is going to be a filter. You can use paint strainers. Those are some things that people use oftentimes for straining herbal tinctures. Those are really good for that. So paint strainers. You can run it through activated charcoal. Activated charcoal is not an absorbent, it's an adsorbent. Adsorbent is what is the way that it's explained. And what that is that it chemically binds to particulates or to things that you're filtering out. So activated charcoal is a very good filter. The one that we use in our home is a Berkey water filter. It's just what we use on a daily basis, because I don't want what's in my city water either drinking on a daily basis. So it filters and purifies, because it passes through two things. It passes through charcoal filter, and then it also has a purification element, taking out some of the other contaminants. That I love that filter. And there's a lot of different versions of it. There's a really nice DIY filter purifier that has a carbon filter in it that you can buy on Amazon. I think I've got a link for it in the book. Those are things that you should have on hand, because again, if you're going to pull water off your roof, if you're going to collect some of that rainwater, well, that's not drinkable water. You need to run it through a filter and a purifier. If you're going to pull water out of the ground, like I'm talking about, that's not drinkable water. You've got to run it through a filter and a purifier. There's nothing worse than drinking water and then being deathly ill because of it. You've got to make that water safe for drinking. There's lots of other commercial filters, DIY filters. This picture, we tried so hard, my designer and I tried so hard to make this picture understandable, but let me walk you through what this is here. So all it is a 5 or 6 gallon bucket. with a hole cut in the bottom, a hole, not in the bottom, but in the side of the bottom. So on the side of the bucket, there's a hole or a slot that you can pull a pan in and out of. And then on the top of the bucket, what you're going to do is put a layer of cotton sheeting, cotton material, t-shirt, whatever. You're going to put a layer of that. You're going to secure it around the top. You're going to put a rope around the top to secure that material in place. Then you're going to put an inch of charcoal, that activated charcoal. Remember, it's an adsorbent. It's going to chemically bond to a lot of the things that the water has. A layer, a 1-inch layer of that charcoal. Then you're going to put another layer of the cotton sheeting, the t-shirt material, whatever it might be. A fine weave is good. Then you're going to put a layer of clay, of really, dense clay kind of dirt. Then you're going to put another layer of cotton material and some rocks just to hold it down. Now that is all held on by a rope, and you're going to dump your water in the top. This is if you have nothing else, or if you're on the, on the road somewhere or whatever, you could make your own filter now. If, how do you get activated charcoal? Well, you can get a wood fire and you could burn some wood and you could put the charcoal in the bottom. So there are some things you can do to make your very own filter / purifier if you need to, if you don't have these materials at home. So just think about that. How does water get through the ground? It has to filter through the earth. So the earth is a good filter already. Charcoal, like we said, is a good filter already. Cotton materials, those are good filters. So all of those things put together can make a DIY filter if you don't have anything else. Then you can take another step to then purify it. Boiling is a really easy way to purify things. The problem is that boiling takes fuel. So if we are short on fuel and we need fuel for heat, we need fuel for light, we need fuel for cooking, then you may not want to use your fuel for purifying your water. That's why it's nice to have a purifier, something that already does that without having to boil it. But boiling does work. Boiling does work. If you don't have a lot of fuel, if you want to conserve the fuel, there are some options beyond boiling. Iodine. Iodine is something that you can store. You can store it, and it has a couple of uses, which is nice about iodine. You can use it for disinfecting a wound site, for disinfecting skin before you're, if you're, trying to clean up something that's been injured. Iodine is great for medicinal purposes, but that same iodine can be used to actually disinfect the water as well. If you think about the word disinfect, I always like to kind of take words and break them down a little bit. We use these words, but we don't really think about what they mean. So disinfect, a disinfectant is it's undoing infection, basically. So a disinfectant is going to kill infection on a skin. It's going to kill infection, which is just simply the things that infect you, which would be viruses, bacteria, parasites. They're going to kill it in water too. So any disinfectant is going to disinfect whatever it's in. It's also going to disinfect water. So iodine is a disinfectant, and it will also disinfect water. So does chlorine, right? Clorox, chlorine. It can, and that's one that we often know about as a chemical disinfectant. You can add 1/8 to 1/4 teaspoon per gallon. The reason that there's a different measurement is because if you have real cloudy water, you can tell there's a lot of stuff in, you're going to use a little bit more chlorine. The problem with chlorine is that it's very unstable. So if you have a bottle of Clorox that you have purchased at the store, that's only going to be active for about a year. If you notice the bottles that you get that are that material there, that opaque plastic, because light actually deactivates the chlorine as well. So the more light it gets, so if you've opened the bottle already, the oxygen also deactivates it. So chlorine isn't very stable, and it's really not something that you're going to be able to store long-term as a purifier. So what I highly encourage is that you store, it's called high-test hypochlorite or pool shock. And if you store that material, what you can do is you can make your own Clorox in essence. In the book, I didn't put it here just because it's kind of detailed, but there's specific measurements. There's amounts of the high-test hypochlorite that you add to water to make your Clorox. And then you use that just like you would use any other Clorox in water. So you make your Clorox and then you use it like I've put on here, 1/8 to 1/4 teaspoon per gallon. And you're using it just like you have Clorox. So what you've done is you've now given yourself a lot of potential for purifying, and it's dry, it's granular, it's storable, and it's not going to inactivate like the liquid Clorox or liquid chlorine solution will. So you've given yourself the ability to make liquid chlorine solution many times over anything that you're going to be able to store in the liquid form. So that's something I highly recommend. There's also something called a WAPI. I guess that's how it's pronounced. I don't know. That's how it's spelled. WAPI, water Water Pasteurization Index, I think, or indicator is what that stands for. And what it is it's kind of a funky little device. It just looks like a little small glass tube, and it has wax in that tube, suspended in that tube. And what you use it for is the sun can actually pasteurize. So the word pasteurize just means to disinfect as well, to heat it up high enough that it's going to kill any microbes that are in that water. So the sun can actually pasteurize water for us as well in any kind of a sun oven, even in an enclosed metal container that has, the potential to get the sun in it. It can pasteurize water as well. And so this little whoppy, what it does is when you suspend it in the water with the wax side up, and when the water has gotten hot enough to be pasteurized, to be safe for drinking, the wax will drop to the bottom. So it's a really cool and expensive, no electricity needed way to tell if the sun has made your water safe. So it's kind of cool, and they're really inexpensive. So look one of those up. I have one of those just because, someday, who knows, we may have to be pasteurizing water in the sun, and I want to make sure that it's safe. So some of the things that you need to do for water, these are the things that I really think should be on your to-do list. Check, 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 check. I want you to get done. First of all, I want you to figure out how much water you need to store for your family. Now, how long do you want it to store, do you want to have stored for? It's really up to you. Obviously, you need at least 3 days, but I think you need at least 3 weeks, which is a lot of water when you start to do the math, but it's something you just need to have. So just start ticking away at it. Just start putting those cases of water bottles under the bed, and throw a blue, 50-gallon bucket out in the garage, and just start thinking about it. Okay, yeah, I got a pump so I could get some groundwater if I needed. Just start thinking about it. Store at least 3 days. So if nothing else, I just want you to store 3 days of water for your family in your home. Store at least one large water container, like I'd said. Have one way to filter and one way to purify. I don't care what they are. There's a lot of commercial ones I didn't talk about just because honestly, I like to use a lot of the less expensive versions of them, but there's a lot of different things that you can look at online. You can spend days looking at all these. Take some of the ones that I've recommended because they're going to be a little less expensive. I love the Berkey. Honestly, it's the one thing that I think is really, really, really worth your money if you have the money to spend. If you don't, then get one of these DIY charcoal filter kinds. I have one of those as well. They're fabulous. I gave one of those as gifts to all of my family one year. I don't know if they appreciated them as much as they probably will someday if they need them, but it's a great thing. You can make them for less than $50 with a charcoal filter. And what it is a kit that you can use that has a spigot on the end. It has a charcoal filter. It has instructions for drilling holes and a couple of 5-gallon buckets. I made these for a church group a few years ago. And so you drill some holes in some 5-gallon buckets, use this charcoal filter, a spigot, and some tubing, and you've made your own, in essence, Berkey filter. It's really a economical way. And you can find DIY carbon filter kits on Amazon. Even you can find them. So that's where I found them when I was making them years ago, and I'm pretty sure I have a link in the book as well. Figure out a found water source. Where could you find some water? So figure that out for your family. Learn how to turn the water off in your home in case you need to preserve the water that you have in your home. And then post instructions on your water heater for draining the water out for use. Now, why do you need to do that? Maybe dad's not home. Maybe whoever knows how to do that isn't home. So put those instructions on the water heater. If you need water, that's a great source of water that's already stored in your home, but you need to know how to do it. And there are some safety pieces that need to happen, including, turning electricity off and those things. So you need to have some instructions there so that whoever is asked to do that is able to. All right, so that's all we're going to talk about for water for a minute until we get to some questions. Short-term food storage. Now, I had another thing that I thought was so funny. I saw a post yesterday, and it was talking about these people who are in emergency situations that aren't used to this kind of weather and what they're doing. And it said they feel a little bit like they're on the show Chopped, and all they've been given to make food is, what did they say? Jell-O, a half a bottle of ketchup, a stale loaf of bread, and some hot dogs. And they're supposed to make a meal out of that. And I just chuckled. I thought, if you're not used to storing food in your home and you can't go to the grocery store and your power's out, and what do you eat? What do you eat? Thankfully, because you're going to store some short-term food storage so that you don't have to get feeling like you're on the Chopped episode, and you're trying to make dinner out of these sad little things that are left in your fridge. Food storage is about being prepared for whatever might come. Now, I love some of these definitions. The simple definition of an emergency is something that you haven't planned for, right? It's simple, and that involves some sort of immediate consequence or struggle. So you didn't plan for it, and it's not necessarily easy. In an emergency situation, the last thing you need to be doing day one is trying to figure out how to use wheat and dried beans. Amen to that, right? Using wheat and dried beans isn't easy on the best of days, let alone on the very first day or second day or third day of an emergency when you are stressed out, you're cold, your kids are hungry. That's not when you need to be learning how to use these long-term dried foods. You'll be hungry and stressed and need energy to get through the next little while. That's what short-term food storage is for. It's food you can use easily with very little preparation for a short time. What does a short time mean? Up to 3 months. That might not sound like a short time, but that is compared to years. So you need to have 3 months worth of food on hand that you could use. Now that sounds a little daunting if you have zero. There's ways to get this and ways to make this happen for less, and you don't have to do it all at once. The big thing that I always tell people though, is just do it consistently and constantly. Every single time you go to the grocery store right now, I want you to buy something extra, just something. Even if it's one 97 cents can of green beans. It's one extra can that you didn't plan on eating this week, so you won't eat this week, and it will add to your storage. Those are the kinds of foods that go into food storage. They're the kinds of things that you can eat easily. You can open a can, you can eat it cold if you need to. My son does that every single day at lunch. I'm like, don't you want to heat that up? Nah, it's fine. But I kind of like food to taste decent. But if we have to, we'll eat that can of beans cold, right? That's not a problem. I had a fellow student in dental school. It was my first year of dental school. And we're all poor as dirt. We're students and we got a lot of student loans. And he would bring a can of refried beans every single day. He would open it up and he would just eat it with a spoon out of the can. Wasn't real palatable to me, but you know what? He survived. He lived, and we could as well. That's the kind of foods that I want you to have on hand. Things that you can eat without preparation, that you could just open a bottle or a box or a can and you could just eat them. Now, those aren't foods that are going to store for a long time, right? That's kind of the nature of the beast here. It's an easy to eat food, but it's not going to store a long time. So these are foods that you need to eat consistently, that you're just constantly cycling through. You just need to have more than you're going to eat that month, but you need to constantly be rotating through this food. So how do you do this and not break the bank while you're doing it? Coupons, of course. I haven't done coupons for a while. I was the queen of couponing when I was in school. But I know there's still plenty of coupons. I know there's coupon sites. I know it's like a whole new ball game now when you have coupon sites and websites and codes and all these things. There's lots of ways to do it. Warehouse stores, obviously, things like Costco. Here in Utah, there's Winco is a good one. Any of those big warehouse stores, you're going to find things for less, but do be careful because in warehouse stores, it looks like a really great deal, but you're buying perhaps more than you're going to be able to use before it expires. That's a big problem with warehouse stores. So make sure that you're actually using foods that are going to store long enough to make it until you're going to be eating that thing. Otherwise, you're just wasting money. Seasonal and holiday sales. This is a really good way, especially baking holidays. So Christmas, I guess, is Valentine's a baking holiday. I don't know, maybe Valentine's. Easter, I think, is a baking holiday. A lot of times they'll have things that like brown sugar, powdered sugar, canned milk, those kinds of things that are good for baking, that are really great for storage as well, that are good for short-term and long-term food storage. Some of those things can last a long time too. So pay attention to seasonal and holiday sales. Case lots, obviously. I just went and stocked up about a month ago. I was realizing we were really dwindling. I have a son that's been living with us. And so for some reason, all of my cans disappear a little quicker than I expected they did, but it's fine. He's using them too. And so they were really getting low. And so I went and stocked up on a bunch of cases just last month. I think that this is a time that often the case lot sales come around. One that you may not know about or think about is international markets. I can't tell you how much I love international or ethnic markets. These are pretty much the only place I shop anymore, honestly. And the reason is you can find things for steals of deals. If you've never been to a Hispanic market, an Asian market, you will be shocked at the prices. So my son just on Monday, actually, they decided they wanted to host a hot pot dinner. If you've never done hot pot, it's so much fun. A Chinese hot pot dinner. And so he was asking me where he should go to get the ingredients. So I said, oh, you need to go to this Asian market. There's one that's, fairly near your home. Go. And he called me later in the day. He said, oh my gosh, I cannot believe how cheap is there, how cheap food is there. I said, I told you it is all the time. And a lot of things that are a lot more expensive in our grocery stores, like coconut milk. It's the only place I buy coconut milk in Asian markets. So check them out. See what they have. I think you're going to be surprised at what they have. And they have a lot of dried foods, tons of dried foods, things you've never seen before, and really good for storage. So check out those international markets. Your garden, that's a great place, right? To store food. Your garden. Hopefully you're getting going on that. I'm going to actually tell you about a garden organization workshop that I have next week. If you haven't already heard, it's going to be a fabulous thing to get on if you're planning to do a garden this year. But your garden's a great place to store food. Right now in my garden, outside in this weather right now in Utah, I have spinach, I have bok choy, I have parsnips growing, I have lettuce. I'm trying to think what I have some escarole, radishes growing under cover right now, not heated. So your garden year round can be a storage place for food. Your neighborhood. And, right now in the middle of the winter, there might not be a lot going on in my neighborhood for food storage, but all the rest of the times of the year, there's a lot going on in my neighborhood. I have a lot of neighbors who have fruit on their trees that they don't use, who have garden spaces that they don't use. So there's actually a gentleman that lives right behind me that has had some significant health issues. He and his wife both have had some major health issues this last year. And so I'm going to garden his garden plot along with mine this year because I just think that we're probably going to need food, and we always need food. So I'm going to be using his spot. There are a couple of neighbors that live about a half a block away. One gentleman lost his wife last year, and he's in his 90s. He has a beautiful garden spot, not using it. I have another neighbor that doesn't use his garden spot either. And so I want you to just be aware of those people. And you know what? It would be very kind of you and very helpful for them if you gardened their spots too. So I'm going to ask these gentlemen if I can use them for some of my experimental crops. I'm going to do a whole bunch of dried beans and things this year that I haven't done in the past. So there are opportunities in your neighborhood to grow food, which means you can have food stored. Now it helps the person that you're helping to grow as well if you're using their yard. But obviously, if you have your own garden, then that's the best. There's all sorts of fruit. I don't know if you've noticed, but a lot of people don't pick the fruit trees anymore. And I have I've plotted it all out in my neighborhood, and everybody knows I'm the crazy lady that'll come and pick your fruit for you. But there are a lot of people that really appreciate you using their fruit, and I will pick it for them, and I'll leave a box on their doorstep, and I'll clean up the stuff that's fallen on the ground, and people are appreciative of that. So just, kindly ask, hey, I noticed that there's some fruit falling off, would you like some help picking that this year? And usually everyone says yes. So I've had a couple times people say, no, I'm going to get to it. And I'm like, oh, great. I just didn't want it to go to waste, and it's no harm in asking. But oftentimes there's a lot of food in your neighborhood that you don't even recognize. So just pay attention, be aware of that. All right, storage tips. There are some things that you need to know as far as storing foods that will help them to last longer. So first of all, foods need to be stored in a cool, dry area. As much as we all love sun, our food doesn't love sun as much. The food actually degrades in light and heat. Any food is going to degrade faster in light and heat. So if you can store foods in a cooler, darker area, for example, if you have a pantry, keep the door closed. There's actually a reason to keep the door closed because your food is going to keep better if it doesn't have light. The cooler it is, the better. So keep your bulk foods down in a cooler basement or a cooler room. Keep the door closed on that maybe, and close if you don't have a basement. Close the vents so that you're not getting heat to that room. Close the door, and that's where things stay. Just be creative. Think, well, okay, where in my house could I find something that is a little bit cooler? Double bag things to keep out oxygen. Again, you're just trying to make things last longer. Keep them in glass if possible. So this is one big problem I've had from ethnic markets is I don't know what it is. Actually, I do know what it is. So this is an interesting thing. A lot of the food in the US has been radiated. It's been radiated because of storage issues for this exact reason. The longer that they can get their food to last on their shelves, the longer, the more cost effective it is for them, if that makes sense. particularly produce. So if they can get their produce to last longer from farm to shelf to you, it's going to be more cost effective for them. So they actually irradiate the food. And what that does is it kills the enzymes in the food. And it also kills eggs. There's pest eggs and everything, and all flours and in all grains. They're always there. And so in the US food source, we often don't. That's why you get weevil and flour and that sort of thing if it's been left out and exposed to oxygen, because the oxygen allows those bugs to hatch and grow. And the our food source has been irradiated. I don't like that, because what it's done is it's actually killed the enzymes in the food. The enzymes are the things that cause food degradation, but they also allow us to digest our food, and they're good for us. So we like enzymes. So I don't like that our food's been irradiated. But what I've noticed is when I get food from some of these ethnic markets, I don't think it's been irradiated the same way, because I get a lot of um, pests growing in the grains. I get a lot of pantry moths coming out of those foods. And so I've learned that I have to put everything that I get from those markets into glass, because a pantry moth can actually chew through a plastic bag. Ask me how I know. And it cannot chew through glass, and it will not hatch in glass because it can't get oxygen into that glass. So I put everything in glass. Oil in small containers. So oil is a big one. You know, it's interesting. One of my family members always has little container of olive oil that's sitting next to the stove, and they use it for cooking eggs and things in the morning. I've got a whole talk about that. That has nothing to do with food storage, but the problem is it's a clear glass bottle that it's kept in. Olive oil is one of the oils that actually oxidizes the quickest, because it hasn't been processed, which we like. But oxidation, what that does is it changes the molecular structure of the oil and makes it rancid. You've heard the word rancid before. You can smell it. You know what rancid oil smells like. It makes it very unhealthy. So, people talk about, okay, we have food stored. It's going to be food, even if it's not the healthiest for us. Well, I agree. But you know what? If it's an emergency, you're going to need energy. You're going to need calories. You're going to need high quality energy and calories to be able to do what you're asked to do. So if it doesn't take any more work to have healthy food stored than to have non-healthy food stored, then let's do the healthy stuff so that your body can be healthy. So for oils, you don't want to put them in big bottles that are exposed to oxygen. That's why if you get a good bottle of olive oil, it's going to come in a dark green glass or an amber colored glass, because the oxygen will degrade that oil. It'll degrade any oil. You need to store oil in the dark. You need to store every single oil in the dark and without oxygen, very, very tightly capped, very tightly lidded. So if you have coconut oil, olive oil, whatever, olive oil is best stored in tins, because there's no light getting to it at all. Coconut oil, I have them in an opaque bucket is when I have my coconut oil, and that's how it should be stored. And then if you have a container that you're going to be serving from, make it be small. So have a small container, go buy a small olive oil container that's still that dark green, and fill your small container with your big one, but keep your big one cool and dark, and just have your smaller container. That's going to keep it a lot healthier, and it's going to make it so that your oils last a lot longer in storage. We're such a fat phobic society, but fats are crucial. If you watch any of those survival shows and things, they're dying for fat. Like, they are trying to find fat anywhere they possibly can to keep alive. We think fat's the enemy. Fat is not the enemy, especially in an emergency. You're going to need those fats. So you need to know how to store them so that they don't go rancid, because if they go rancid, that's going to be very damaging for your cells. So you want good, healthy oils stored so that they store for a long time. Flours in the fridge are cool. That's because of those eggs that are in every single bit of flour and grains that we have. Flours need to be kept as cool as possible. Mine are down in my cold storage. Once you open them and they have oxygen in them, they should go in a fridge if possible, or a very, very cool area. I have some flour that I get little tiny black bugs. I'm not sure what they are, but I just throw them away and use the rest of the flour. It's not going to kill you, especially if you bake with it. My kids, they don't like to hear those kinds of things, but it's the truth. So I make sure there's no bugs in the food we eat, but sometimes there's going to be some bugs and things, and you just throw them away and it's okay. But you're going to try to store them in a way that you don't get bugs. Acidic foods. So if you have a can of tomatoes, let's say, or a can of mandarin oranges or pineapple, they're only good for about 1.5 years in those cans. So you need to be cycling through those cans quite quickly. The acid actually erodes the can itself and pulls some of the particles of the metal into the food. So you don't want that. Non-acidic foods, so let's say a canned corn or canned beans, they're going to store for 2 to 5 years. So they store a little bit longer. So I usually stock up a little bit more on those kinds of cans, but get a little less and just rotate them quicker if I'm doing an acidic canned food. All right, some to-dos for short-term food storage. So I want you to start purchasing something extra, just like I said. I want you to start purchasing something extra every time you go to the store this month. Just one thing extra, two things extra, one extra case of cans, whatever it might be. I want you to just think extra. What can I do extra? Find something on sale and get a couple extra. Buy some foods in bulk and watch for case lot sales on cans. So just be really conscious as you're going to the store. What can I get extra? Make sure to include some high energy foods. Those are the things we talked about, those meats, fats. Those also need to be in your storage to be able to have the energy you need during any kind of emergency. Remember condiments, spices, and some treats. You need a treat now and then. Chocolate is a fabulous thing to store. And you know what? If you don't eat it, somebody's going to, and they're going to be very happy to trade you something very valuable for that chocolate if you have extra. So store some things that make food taste great too. And then make a goal. I want you to make a goal that you're going to have 3 months worth of easy to use food stored for your family. Now, I didn't tell you by when, because that's going to be different for every single family based on your financial and other situations. But I want you to make a goal for yourself. So let's say you make a goal that in the next 6 months, you're going to have 3 months of food stored, or in the next year, the next 2 years, whatever it might be. I don't care, as long as you make yourself a goal and you make it trackable. This is how I'm progressing towards that goal. The calm and the assurance you receive from that is going to be enormous, and you'll be blessed for it. So keep up the good work. I'm so excited that you're on this pathway. Next time, or keep working on, water and short-term food storage. The next 2 topics are long-term food storage and gardening. So to kick off the gardening for the year, I'm going to be doing a garden education series where I walk you all the way through the year. Right now, it's our Plan Your Garden workshop. So I'm going to be talking about how to find the location that you're going to be planting in, design to get the maximum harvest out of the location that you have. I'm going to teach you how to select which seeds to plant, what kind of seeds, which ones you need to start inside, when to start your seeds, and how to prepare your soil for that growing. So we're going to be doing all of that in this workshop, including you'll get a workbook along with it. So there's a sign up on Eventbrite. You can search on Eventbrite it's called Living Well with Dr. Michelle. Right, you're going to search for an event, Living Well with Dr. Michelle, but there's also advertisements all over our stuff. So if you go on any Total Care Dental or Living Well with Dr. Michelle sites, you're going to see the links for this. It's going to be a fabulous workshop, and it's going to be kicking you off to the garden season this year. Then the next garden workshop I'm going to be doing is going to be actually, how do you plant? How do you plant? How do you maintain the garden? How do you do watering? How do you keep everything growing? What do you do to make it a low maintenance garden that you can actually harvest enough for your family and more out of in a very small space? So that's going to be fun. And then through the year, we're also going to be talking about using some garden to table recipes, garden to table methods, those kinds of things. And then in the fall, we're going to do a big one on food preservation and how you're going to preserve your harvest so that it's going to last you clear through until the next year. And then in the fall, even after that, we're going to talk about winter gardening. What are you going to do so that you can garden year round as well? So it's going to be a whole series of garden education as we go through the year. That's going to be topical to what we're doing right now. And I'll be about a month or so ahead of when you need to know it so you can get started. But this is the first topic right now, and I'm really excited about that. This next Thursday night, 7 p.m., so a week from today. Now, like I said, every other month, I'm going to be doing these topics as well. So in April, mark your calendar. We'll send out info as well. But April 14th at 7 p.m., it's a Wednesday. I had requests for a Wednesday. April 14th at 7 p.m. It's free. You have to register to watch it. So make sure you register. You'll also get the recording if you register. I've been telling everyone that. Next time is going to be about long-term food storage and gardening. So make sure you catch that. And then I have another thing I'm so excited about as well. I have a new book that's coming soon called 12 Steps to Self-Sufficiency. And in this book, it talks about everything you need to provide everything your family goes to a store for. Literally everything, if you really had to. It's everything from making your own medicine to making your own cosmetics or skincare products, making your own home care products, your own cleaning products, Obviously, lots about cooking your own food, gardening, raising your own food. There's a whole section in there about alternative gardening, winter gardening, all of that, raising backyard animals, how to budget, how to reuse and recycle. Anyway, it's actually the biggest book I've ever written. It's going to be well over 300 pages. I'm just in the final edits right now, and it should be out hopefully in a month. I'm telling you a month, so that hopefully it will happen in a month. I've got a lot of work before then, but I'm really excited about this book. And I hope that you can get on this self-sufficiency train, because it's the thing that really brings that confidence and peace. So I'm excited about that. So hopefully you'll join me for all these things. I can't wait to share. All right, let's get to some of these questions. Let me see where we're at here. All right. Oh, it might not be questions. It might just be Aubrey talking about, okay, what was the filter you recommend if one can afford it? I love the Berkey. So it's called Berkey, Berkey. Look it up. And it's the thing, I have one on my kitchen counter. That's the only water that we use. And it's so funny because I've had a couple of my kids living in my basement with their wives, and they won't drink any water either, except for the Berkey now too. They're all spoiled. And my son the other day, we hadn't filled the Berkey, it didn't have any water in it. He's like, I can't drink any water. I said, well, of course you can. There's the faucet right there. And he said, no, I only like to drink Berkey water. I'm like, okay. But it really does. It makes a difference. Yes, Berkey water filter is already answered. I think the reason our grandmother sifted flour is to sift out the bugs. You may be right, Dana. So it may be that we all need to make sure that we're sifting our flour. I haven't sifted flour in years. I have a flour. What is it? What is it even called? The thing that you spin like this? I haven't done that for years, but you're right. It might actually have been the bugs. You know, I have an interesting relationship with bugs. I actually don't mind them. And I've had some interesting experiences actually. I one time, she's now my daughter-in-law, but at the time she wasn't. She was just dating my son. We were having salad, and it was fresh, beautiful lettuce from the garden. Everything was fresh from the garden. And she was eating it. She looked down and she went, oh, there's a bug. There was a little caterpillar just crawling up the side of her bowl. And I said, oh yeah, you got a bonus. And I, grabbed it and threw it away. And she just looked like, oh my gosh, what kind of family am I marrying into? But we all survive. We all survive, even if we eat the bugs, and it's just fine. But it tells me that our food's alive if the bugs still like it. Honestly, that's one thing that I always joke about. If the bugs like it, then we probably should like it too, because it's still alive. It hasn't been irradiated. How much high-test hypochloride do I use to purify water? That's a great question. It's in the book, and I wish I could tell you in a short second, but I can't. Actually, I probably can find it fairly quickly here. I have the book up on the screen here myself. Let me find it real fast for you. There it is. Okay. The way you use it is you mix 1 heaping teaspoon of the high-test hypochlorite to 2 gallons of water. So a heaping teaspoon to 2 gallons of water. You mix that thoroughly and you let it stand for 30 minutes. So again, a heaping teaspoon to 2 gallons. Mix it up, let it stand. You now have Clorox. And then you're going to use the Clorox the exact same way. So, well, this actually says you should use 2 tablespoons of that liquid to 2 tablespoons to 3/4 of a gallon. So this is much more than I had on there for the Clorox. 2 tablespoons to 3/4 of a gallon of untreated water. So that's how you use it. So again, a heaping teaspoon of the powder to 2 gallons of water, makes your liquid. Then you take 2 tablespoons of that liquid and add it to 3/4 of a gallon of water. And that's how you're going to purify it. You'll be able to tell because you should be able to taste it. You know, that chlorine taste, if you've ever swam in a swimming pool before, you're going to be able to taste a little bit of chlorine taste. That tells you that it's purified. Unfortunately, we don't really like that chlorine taste, but that tells us that tells you that it's been purified. So good question. All right, well, let me go back through a few of those things. Those are all the questions. We must have covered everything so well tonight. If you have any more questions, make sure to pop them up there as we finish up here. But just those last few things. Let me get back to my screen here. Last few things. Mark, if you're wanting to do a garden this year, join me on Eventbrite next Thursday, the 25th at 7 p.m. I think Aubrey in the chat put all of the links for all of that. So if you want to join that, please do. mark your calendar for Wednesday, April 14th at 7 p.m. for the next segment that we're going to talk about long-term food storage and gardening. And then watch for announcements about the 12 Steps to Self-Sufficiency book that I'm so excited about. And, it's kind of an interesting way of life that I love. I love being self-sufficient. And it's a little bit of a challenge for me to never go to the store. Not only is it a challenge, but I think it's rewarding. It's internally rewarding knowing that you're providing for yourself and your family. And it's a great way to save money. I share in the book a funny story. I'll share it with you. It's in, I can't remember which chapter. It's a chapter I was just barely writing. I think maybe chapter 12. I share a story about a family friend, and she is a lot like me. She doesn't really like shopping a whole bunch, but there was something she had to go to the mall for. Like there was a store in the mall that had what she needed, and it was the only store that had it. So she took her 8-year-old daughter and they ran in the mall real quick, and she didn't want to go anywhere but just this one store. And so she was, walking quickly to the store she was going to, and she realized her 8-year-old daughter wasn't with her. And so she turned around and there was her daughter just staring at everything in the mall. And she looked at her mom and she said, "Mom, did you know this place existed?" And her mom laughed and said, well, yeah, I knew this place existed. She's like, "And you didn't tell me about it?" She said, "Well, no, I don't really love the mall." And, the reason is, though, that when we go to places and we see things that we don't have, we all of a sudden think we need them. Isn't that an amazing thing how that works? But if we never see it, we never know what we're missing out on. So that's one of the most beautiful things about self-sufficient life too, is I feel like it's a self-fulfilled life because we're happy with what we have. We've done for ourselves, we're happy with what we have. So I'm really excited to be sharing these things. Emergency preparedness goes hand in hand with self-sufficiency. To me, self-sufficiency is emergency preparedness, and it's just an emergency preparedness kind of life. So I'm excited to be able to share all of these things with you, and so excited that you're on this journey with me. So thank you so much, and keep preparing, and we will see you in April, or hopefully next week if you're going to be doing the garden. So thank you all, and have a fabulous month.